Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Ryden. How many times have we heard of veterans of foreign wars who are hesitant to share their stories of combat? Was it something they did? Was it something they saw? Or was it just too painful to relive? Well, our guest today, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander R. Tambascia, Armor Cav retired, is himself an Army veteran who has seen action overseas, and he's more than willing to talk about it in his latest book, Imperial Storm, Part 3 of his military science fiction series, Orbital Drop Armor Team. Welcome, Alexander. So good to
Thank
have
you
you
for having
here.
me, sir.
What have
Thank
you
you. It's an honor to be here.
Oh, well, great. What have you done in this series what you've done in this series is to tell your story of military service, but in a completely different way. You've moved it to the future. That's a unique approach.
It's more like parallel path because, I start back when I graduated Armor Cav, and I just kind of made an alternate history path to tell my story,
Hmm.
which it is, and actually I got to give credit to Jonathan Yanez, who's another author who kept encouraging me to write my story, to tell my story. I got to tell, and I told him I don't write autobiographies. I'm a boring writer. And he says, you know who Aldous Huxley is? I go, yeah, he Brave New World. He said, well, don't you know that's an autobiography about his drug abuse? And I'm like, oh. And then he's like, well, why can't you do the same? And that's how I kind of made my book, is by saying, giving, saying real events, having the real people I served with in the book, and
Hmm.
just changing the backdrop.
Yeah.
And I was able to help it. And it was very therapeutic too, because it really has helped a lot, with controlling my PTSD and everything. And
Hmm.
I kind of wrote the book as, as a way for other vets to help deal with theirs as well.
It's kind of like a whole new genre, military historical science fiction. And there are obviously some things in there that that aren't real. Like, I mean, I love you've taken a few steps ahead into the future with things like the Halo device and the Brain Pal. It's sort of a new way of looking at reincarnation, sort of. First of all, explain how that works, dying and getting a new body. How does that work in your
Oh,
book series?
the way the way it works is, the empire, that the galactic empire, that Earth is one of the three races that serves as a warrior resource. Um, they have 3D printing technology. And so basically, the halo, which is on your body, records your current state up to the time you die. And that data is then transmitted to your nearest headquarters, where they can send you to a 3D printer and actually 3D print you. And the last stage is they dump your last conscious into your head.
Yeah. Yeah, like I remember at one point you were saying the character who you call Tambascia, by the way, that's very good. He's come back, but he's not. The process isn't quite completed yet. His brain pal isn't completely in sync with the rest of his body, right?
Right. The brain, and I did that on purpose because, it's to help to show that as great as science might be for us, there's still quirks with science. And that's one of the quirks I put in, is that, your brain pals won't instantly turn on. You're not 100%. There's a recovery process after being printed each time. And I also put in the books, I was actually in book 2, where I talked about, every time you die and get printed, your body suddenly changes because you're making a copy of a copy of a copy. So
Right.
there's problems in the book, but it's and that's why in the book it's only a very select people are picked, or for this process.
Yeah.
And my character, I did it this way because, I got involved with some things, with certain departments, and when I served, and I got to play with nice toys. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of one of the reasons I put that in. And I actually put myself in the book because, I name this. I'm marketing this series as my autobiography put to a sci-fi backdrop. So I kind
Yeah.
of figured it would be wrong not to make myself a character. But
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. And then you take liberties with all kinds of cool stuff, like you talked about the toys you had access to. You've invented new ones like the Sutherland tank with the plasma lance and the sandstorm cloak. How did you come up with that stuff? Is this just things that you saw what's in existence now and you think, boy, this could be better if this?
well, the Sutherland tank, actually, I put that in there because Donald Sutherland died when I was writing the book. And Donald Sutherland, anyone who's seen Kelly Heroes, who is a tanker,
Hmm.
knows about it when he played the character Oddball
Okay.
in Kelly's Heroes. So to honor him in my book, I had a tank named after him, which is the Sutherland. And what I did is how I come up with all the technology in my books. I basically sat down and said, okay, take away money, politics,
Hmm.
take away all that stuff, and just let science do what it would do. Where would science be in 20, 50, 100 years from today if money was no object and they got all the funding? And that's how I kind of figured out the technology, because all my technology is very close to real technology that we have. I mean, plasma was was really came around in 1980s is when they finally recognized plasma as the fourth state of matter. So, that's something that we have today. It's just we just don't know how to use it.
Use it on TVs. That's about the only thing
Yeah.
I know of.
So that's how I did the technology, and it's and I really don't want people to focus on my technology. That's why I also kind of it's not very you know one of the biggest criticisms I get from some fans is it's not science fiction enough. And I did that on purpose because I want people to focus on the characters, the interactions I have between the different characters. I want that to be the focus, not the technology. And I personally think I did a good job of that because the most favorite character of all my fan base is Gunny. Uh, Everybody loves Gunny. So I kind of figured that I succeeded in that
Yeah.
role because it's really about the person, the fighting, and the aftermath of
Hmm.
the fighting.
Now, you've also introduced, like I say, what a great imagination you have. You've got a whole range of creatures like space monkeys, Cerberians, and blue-skinned Gamadians.
The Serbians. And okay, the Serbians is basically based off a scientist who has this "What If" series on YouTube. Is what if this was this way? So I did a what if a planet instead of the dominant species coming from monkeys, sapiens, you know, we came from the canine. And
Ah,
what happens is they the Serbians
it would be
basically
clear.
from
It's
Cerberus,
not Sir S-E-R. It's C-E-R.
CBR,
Okay.
from the Latin word Serbius, which was
Okay.
the guardian of hell.
Hmm.
So I just add an IN on that. The Serbians is a race that looks like humans but are like twice the size of an average human. But they have very subtle canine features to them, just like if you compared us to monkeys, yeah, we have similarities, but we don't look like monkeys, and
Right.
so the same thing with them; they don't look like dogs. And the Gamma um, they, I just, that was just what if on various the type of planet they were on, and where the sun had circled, what could be the pigment, and and the what if generator I was using. He said most likely it would be blue, so that's how I got the blue gamma medians,
Hmm. Hmm. That's interesting.
which which to the characters, the twins, has taken a life of its own. My twin fan base is very energetic, and they really are really supportive of the series.
Yeah.
And they want me to write more about the twins.
Well, of course they would. Well, now you've got this is part three. Can this book be read as a standalone, or is it really obviously you'd want them to read one and two, but I mean, is it necessary to read one and two to really enjoy three?
I think if you want to understand some of the history and understand how the character got where he is,
Hmm.
I would recommend start at book one and read it in order. But each book in itself is a standalone. Book one is about K4S4. Book two is about Afghanistan. Book three is about Iraq. So each one is in many ways its own standalone story. But to understand the continuity of the characters, I would tell people, yeah, you can read book three if you want, but but there'll be things you won't understand the who,
Hmm.
what, and why for unless you read books two and one. So
Yeah. Well,
it it's like that.
what's your writing process like? I mean, do you write every day? Are you constantly you thinking of ideas and writing them down, or do you have like what we call in like in movies and stuff, the Bible, where all these characters have various traits that you go back and make sure you get it right. Do you have something like that that you just kind of?
I have a writer's Bible that I use, and the way my writing process is, I dedicate one day a week, because I'm a part-time author. I have a day job, so I dedicate one day a week where I do writing. But as I go live through the week, if I see something, hear something, or just watch something that spurts an idea, I write it down so I
Yeah,
don't
sure.
forget it.
Yeah.
And that's how I basically do it. So, you know, like Rick Patlow, um, Jeffrey Haskell, which are full-time authors, they're producing, two books a year. It takes me a year to write one book.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it's, because I'm only doing it, part-time.
Well, it only took me 13 years to write one book, so you're ahead of me there. Hey, as a veteran yourself, you've been active in helping other vets who are dealing with PTSD. Tell us about that. And it's not just through the books, right? It's through other means.
Right. Well, I do participate with in PDS functions events to help other vets. I actually became an ordained priest,
Hmm.
where so people can talk to me about their PTSD and know that anything said in that role is 100% confidentiality. It doesn't leave. And I tell them, I chose that instead of a social worker because I said, well, the Supreme Court said a social worker can be compelled by a court to talk about their clients. I said the Supreme Court said anything said to a priest is sacred and you can't, So I try to give people that feeling where they could talk to me and not worry about any repercussions or any judgments. I mean, you know, um, so I tend to make myself available, and I work with other vets to help them go through things. I volunteered for some helplines. I work on a military base in my day job, so I support the
Hmm.
other veterans I work with. I have an open door policy where, if they're feeling, regardless how they're feeling, if they need someone to talk to, I said my door, my office door is always open. If I'm in a meeting, I will stop my meeting to help them.
Oh,
So,
well, that's great.
um, and because when I came back from my last deployment, I was in a dark place because a lot of stuff has happened to me, and the VA was worthless. And they didn't even diagnose I had PTSD until a few years later, which when they finally got into treatment, it's not that I just have PTSD. It's like I had PTSD for numerous years after coming back that needed to be treated, and so I don't want other people to go through that. I want to make myself available and talk to them.
Hmm.
And I'll be honest, during the early years of my PTSD, I did attempt suicide, and from survivor's guilt. And so I understand what they're going through because I've been there.
Hmm.
And that's why when I make myself available, I don't get I you'll never hear me say the typical anti-suicide slogans, or what, to do. It's like I since I know what drives it, I know how to approach them as a person
You're right.
and not make them feel uncomfortable talking. And I think that's a great thing. And in a way, I think it's to help, and I'll admit, it's helped me treat my own PTSD and deal with some of my guilt of the things I've done. I kind of think every veteran I help gives me one karma point for every life I've taken when I wore the uniform, type of
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned in the top at the top of the program, we do hear so many veterans who just don't want to talk about it. That seems a common theme that people just don't. Why is that?
To be honest, civilians can't understand it. I mean, for example, when I'm with a bunch of veterans in the workplace and we're talking, we're talking as military members,
Mhm.
and you'll get that one civilian hear us say something and say, "Well, that's offensive. You can't say that in the office." And we're like, "What's offensive?" We
Yeah.
don't. So for them, that's just one example of how a civilian can't even understand the way we communicate, and they think everything's offensive. And so a lot of people are like, I don't want to talk to these people because they just won't relate, won't understand. They'll be judgmental, and because when I meet with fellow veterans, yeah, we talk about when we were deployed and the things we've done because we understand
Hmm.
what we're going through.
Yeah.
And um, but when a vet comes back and especially like a New Hampshire vet, for example, where everyone is, where I'll tell you right now, my neighbor is a black bear, the other one is a moose, and my backyard I have a very angry beaver. Those are my neighbors. So you know all you and so anyone you would likely see would be more likely to be a civilian than a vet, so they don't want to talk.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and in today's society, I people, I don't want to make this political, but to emphasize my point is, where how people stand on enforcing the law, immigration, Trump support. It's also judgmental. Someone doesn't want to come out and say, "Hey, I fragged a kid because I thought he had a bomb vest on."
Right.
You
Right.
know, they're gonna feel, no, they're gonna feel that they're gonna instantly become the target of an attack. So
Yeah. Sure.
it's very hard for veterans
Wh-
to come out.
What do you hope readers get out of that? Obviously, it's a fun read. It's science fiction. That's always fun. But for civilians uh, to read this, what do you hope they get out of it?
To understand what we go through. I
Mm.
mean, in my book, I'm very detailed in not only the action, but a lot of the boring stuff in between. All the
Mhm.
stuff we do. I mean, in all my books, I describe the whole hurry up and wait,
Hmm.
where there's long terms of waiting. And then I also talk about the aftermaths. It's like, when we get out of combat, we then have to go back to our wherever we're staying, barracks, ship, um, berth, and we're alone, and then everything we've done on that operation hits us. And so I
Yeah.
want people, to understand what we go through. It's
Mhm.
not like Holly. The book I tell people is my book is realistic because it's not like Hollywood. It's not about great victories, great wars. In fact,
Mhm.
anyone who's read my book knows that my character is, the only reason why he succeeds at anything is dumb luck. He's definitely no Rambo. And I do that on purpose because, I want people to see the main character as relatable. And I've got a lot of comments from vets that, that my writing is so realistic, they felt they were back in the tank.
Yeah.
And that meant a lot to me.
What a great endorsement. The book is called Imperial Storm, Part 3 of the military science fiction series, Orbital Drop Armor Team. Alexander, thanks so much for being with us today, and good luck with the book, and I encourage people to read it.
Just one thing before we go.
Sure.
I just want to make fans aware that I'm also producing a companion music CD that I'm going to be putting on Amazon Music,
Okay.
which are songs built around my book. They're heavy metal songs that I wrote, and I use a VA to do actually sing the lyrics. I use a VI, an AI, so I'm very upfront with that. But I wrote the lyrics, and it's going to be called Hymns of the Imperial Forces. And I'm producing this for fans, because they want more, and I do that. So, and I actually have music videos on YouTube under the Imperial Information Network, and so people can go see them there. So, um, there's more. there's more to the series than just the books. There's music, there's videos. So you know, there's a documentary series on YouTube that talks about the character races more in depth.
Mhm.
So
No, that's great.
there's a lot more than them just getting a book.
And one of these days there'll be part 4. Hey, thanks again for joining us. Huh?
Thank you very much.
Will there be a part 4?
Yes, but it's not going to happen fast.
No.
I told my readers in book 3, and you know, there will be a book 4 at some point, but I want to take the time after complete book 3 to explore different arcs in this amazing universe that I built. And I've had so many people ask me different questions about what. So my next book is called Imperial Privateer, which is going to talk about the whole law, you know, law enforcement and border security. You know, how does the empire manage, you know, this vastness? So I'm exploring that story arc because I've had a lot of fans say, you know, well, how does the empire deal with this? You know,
Mm-hmm.
or is it like, you know, or is it war everywhere? And so I'm going to do that first, and then I will come back and give a book 4 to everybody because I don't think I could go more than 2 years before fans would start, you know, pitchforks and torches of demanding a book 4.
That sounds good. And it sounds like it's ripped from the headlines. Hey, listen, thanks again for being with us. And thank you, folks, for spending a few minutes with us on the Global Book Network. I'm Paul Ryden. We'll see you next time.